Hey everybody, I'm Shonna and welcome back to my channel, Shonna MissyMe HD, where I strive to inform, encourage, and motivate you to reach your educational goals by helping you gain admission into health-related undergrad and graduate programs. And today we are talking about general professions across the board, specifically focusing on study habits and study techniques. But before we get started, you guys know what to do. Go ahead and press the subscribe button and make sure you click the notification bell so that you're the first to know when I release the next video. But first, our shout out for today's video goes to Miss Luciana. She followed me over from TikTok. Hey girl, I see you. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for watching.
Don't get me started.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of the video, I want to just go ahead and say that everybody is different, okay? What I use may not work for you and what I use may be awesome for you. So I do encourage all of you guys to search other videos and other content creators and see what study techniques work for them when they were applying to a professional school or taking an entrance exam like the LSAT or the PCAT or the MCAT, or simply just how to get through high school or how to manage your pre-med or pre-pharmacy or pre-nursing courses, okay? So I'm going to break my video down into study habits and then study techniques. But first, I just want to give a couple of broad overall points that I want you guys to take away from this video. Number one is to be patient with yourself. Not everyone will be able to develop their good study habits or study techniques overnight. It will take failures before you realize what actually works for you. Number two, you need to figure out what your learning style is. I like to tell people to use the website howtolearn.com. I think that's what it's called, but I'll have the link in the description box below. Use that link, take the quiz, and it'll help you figure out what your learning style is. And then number three is be okay with the fact that it may take you more time or you may need to use more resources than your classmates or your colleagues and peers. So in the field of medicine, you never really get to a point to where you're not learning or you're not having to study for something. I'm still studying, so I still have to utilize my study routine. One thing I wanted to share with you guys is that I recently introduced a new drink into my study routine. This is a tea that I've been using for the last week or so. It's called TEAMI, and it has definitely, I would say, definitely added to my study routine because it helps me feel more comfortable while I'm studying. As far as not feeling bloated and just feeling comfortable while I'm sitting in a chair or lying in bed, it has definitely helped improve my study sessions. When you're not comfortable, you stop studying. When you don't feel good, when your body doesn't feel good, you won't study. They have these really cute cups that I love, and if you don't know me by now, pink is my favorite color, and so I'm so in love with this tumbler. It's so cute. So if you guys want to know more information about that, just check the information in my description box, and there's also a link if you're interested in purchasing your own tea. You guys should definitely try it out. It may help you with your own study routine. So first, let's address good study habits. Number one is optimizing yourself as an individual. So what I mean by that is actually doing what you can do for yourself to make sure you are at the tip-top shape to actually study. So just like when you would practice and work out and train all year for a season of basketball or football, you want to actually make sure you're doing the same things for your body and your mind so that when you get ready to study, you're efficient. You want to be well rested. You want to have a nice meal so that you're not hungry. You don't want to be too cold. You don't want to be too hot. You know, you want to be physically in a condition that's going to allow for you to actually study effectively. You have to have the mindset to study, okay? So there's a difference between having to study and being forced to study because you need to make a good grade, and then also wanting to study because you want to learn the material, not because you want to make a good grade. So if you can somehow start to become that person that has a mindset of wanting to know the material outside of making the grade, then it'll more likely make you want to actually study because you want to be educated, you want to be informed, and you want to know more about your particular field of interest. So have the mindset of wanting to study, and it will definitely have a big difference on how your studying actually goes because you're positive about it, you're excited about it, and you're eager to learn. Number three is your environment, and I think this is a huge one because for me, I definitely saw differences when I studied in certain places, and then sometimes I just got tired of one location, so I had to switch it up. So I would study at school in one of the small study rooms. I would study at my house, obviously, because sometimes you just have to study at home. And then whenever I got tired of both of those places, I would go to Barnes and Nobles and just kind of sit around the Starbucks area and just choose a quiet spot and just study there. You have to kind of figure out what you like, what works for you. I never was a library type person. And there were times where I like just wanted to go out to eat because I was just like tired of not being able to have a life. I would go sit up at Chili's or Cheddar's or something, bring my book by myself and like study while I ate dinner. So be creative. Like if you're just tired of one spot, switch it up and go somewhere else. I actually recommend studying in groups for some of your study sessions. I never did this, but I actually regret not doing it because sometimes you don't understand concepts as well as somebody else, and just a simple explanation that takes 2 or 3 minutes can save you 2 or 3 hours in studying. If you had to did it on your own, it would take you forever to get, but if you ask somebody who really understands it, it has a good way of explaining, you can literally get it in 2 or 3 minutes and save yourself time. And then sometimes just feeding off of each other until you kind of work through equations or work through problems and concepts, it really does help you to remember what you actually studied. I don't recommend more than 4 people because you can get distracted. It can be very hard to kind of mix in everybody's own different learning style, and then you end up wasting more time than you actually spend learning something. So don't make the groups too big. Don't always study in groups. Sometimes study alone. Just have a good balance of self-study and then group study. Also realizing if you're a morning studier or a night studier or evening, afternoon. I was a morning person, so I made it a point to wake up early. I would study before class, and then I would also study after class. And then like around 10 p.m., like my brain just shut down. Like I was no good. So there was no overnighters for me. Like I couldn't do that. Like my brain just didn't work that well at nighttime. Also, if you're a person who likes to study with music in the background, like I was that person. Like music helped me. It helped me process things better. I don't know why. It kept me in the mood. It kept me in the groove. I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'm about to study. I got my coffee. I got my tea, or I got my Coke. I got my music in the background. I got my headphones on, whatever. Like it helped me. So if music or TV or tossing a ball up and down or clicking your pen, whatever helps you kind of get in the zone, that's what you need to incorporate. And then also, last but not least, having a study schedule. And this is so important for people who are studying for the MCAT or actually in college or already in medical school. It is so important to have a schedule and a plan to follow, saying that you're going to cover chapters 1 through 3 this day, then you're going to work on your notes and your summary that day, then you're going to just only focus on keywords and or equations or pathways on this day. Like you have to have a schedule, because the worst thing you want to do is to actually be able to comprehend things when you study, but just not be able to get through all of it before the test, right? So you want to be organized and you want to go based off a schedule so that you are able to cover all of the material in detail before the exam, so that you're not rushing at the last minute or trying to cram everything at the last minute because you didn't stick to a schedule. So now I'm going to talk about some studying techniques that work for me, or some that I knew that worked for others. Like I said, if it's not your thing, you don't have to do it. Obviously, I'm just sharing my experience. Please, I encourage you guys to go watch other videos and to ask your classmates or colleagues what they're doing, what's working for them, and then you try those different methods, and then you come up with your own customized way of doing this. But I'm going to share what worked for me. Number 1, decide if you're going to be a class goer or someone who streams the lectures online. If you're in high school, then obviously you might not have that option. If you're in college or in medical school and you have the option of watching a streamed lecture, then obviously if you don't want to wake up and go to class at 8 a.m., then you can wake up later and watch the lecture online. So figure out what you're going to be. Okay, a class goer or a streamer, and then adjust your schedule according to that. So for me, I was a class goer. I went to class every day for the first year for sure, and then maybe 75% of the time for my second year in medical school. In college, I went to class every day because my college did not offer lectures streamed online. Okay, so I went to class every day in college. But for med school, I would pre-read before I went to class. If I did not look at the material before the lecture was presented, then going to lecture was a complete waste of my time. I didn't get anything from it because I'm not an auditory learner. I can't sit back, listen to the professor, and look at slideshows and then leave knowing what the hell we talked about that day. Like, I'm not writing a note, or if I'm not following along in my syllabus or in my textbook, I'm not going to know anything. Therefore, it becomes a waste of time. So if you're going to go to lecture, make sure when you go to lecture, you're getting something from it. And I find that when you pre-read, when you read before the lecture, whether it makes sense or not, it doesn't have to make sense. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to spend a lot of time. It's kind of like a brief overview or like a skim through, just so that your brain recognizes something that the professor says. But if you haven't tried pre-reading before your lecture, I would definitely encourage you to try that. After I would leave lecture, I would take my textbook and my PowerPoints and whatever notes I wrote during class, and I would combine all of that into one summary for the chapter or for the topic or whatever you may be studying, okay? And when I say summary, that does not mean take what you read and write every word verbatim. Basically, you have to get into the system of saying, okay, what is this chapter about? All right, what is the function of this? How does this work? What are the mechanisms? What are the steps? What's included? What's rate limiting? What's not rate limiting? Getting the habit of asking yourself those questions so that you can pretty much structure your summary to be effective. Because the last thing you want to do is write a summary of something that you read and everything you wrote down is not high yield and it's not going to be tested. And everything you didn't write down is what's tested, right? So you have to kind of get an idea and say, okay, if I read this chapter, what would they ask me about? And a lot of times, if you're reading out of a textbook, just go to the end of the chapter and look at the practice questions that they ask you. Make sure you can answer those questions. Make sure your summary answers those questions at the end of the chapter. Make sure your summary is aligned with whatever is presented in the PowerPoints. Make sure your summary is written so that you understand it. You don't want to write verbatim what the chapter says because you still may not understand the text. Get it in your mind, how it makes sense to you, and then write your summary that way. Because writing a summary is going to help you later on when you have to review, so that you don't have to reread the textbook. You can just read your summary. But your summaries have to be effective. They have to cover the material that's actually going to be tested. Number 3 is pretty much taking your summary and condensing it to a one-page review. So instead of having a small paragraph or a couple of sentences about a certain concept, your review is going to say, explain the Krebs cycle. Okay, and then you may even bullet, a couple of Krebs cycle steps or a couple of rate limiting steps in the Krebs cycle. But your summary is going to be an actual explanation of the Krebs cycle, so that if you have to turn around and explain it to somebody, you pretty much restate what you wrote in your summary. But your review would just simply say, be able to explain the Krebs cycle, or what are the rate limiting steps in the Krebs cycle? What does the Krebs cycle produce? Okay. That would be what your review is. And by the time you get to the point to where you're making your review, you already know your summary, right? You already understand the whole process. So all you have to do is be able to pinpoint those things that may be asked on the test. And speaking of Krebs cycle, it brings me to my next point, which is number 4. Sometimes using diagrams and pictures is going to be your best friend. So for me, when I was learning about glycolysis and the Krebs cycle, electron transport chain, I couldn't just read that material. Like, I literally had to study the pictures, and then I took it a step further and drew those pictures. So whatever pictures that were incorporated in my PowerPoints or in the textbook, I would draw them over and over and over until I understood the process. Until in my mind, I knew which enzyme was converting what into what, and how many ATPs were going to be produced by however much of glucose. So that's what I had to do, and I did it over and over and over because repetition is king, okay? Some of these classes like anatomy and physiology and microbiology is straight memorization. Maybe not physiology. Physiology has some concept to it. Actually has a lot of concept to it. But anatomy for sure and microbiology are like memorization classes. And all you have to do is repeat, however many times it takes you to repeat it until you know it, okay? And so using Anki and Quizlet will help you. I personally didn't use either one of those. I used my review sheets, okay? I memorized my review sheets, and so that was how I got through med school. I didn't use not one note card, not one Quizlet, believe it or not. But a lot of people use those, and they're very effective for them. So I would definitely encourage you guys to use Anki and Quizlet if you're not already using it. And what you can do is you can't get on Quizlet and go through the terms twice. That's not gonna work. You have to go over it several times, especially if you're in med school, because it's gonna be so much information. You're gonna study one topic and then study another topic and completely forget what you studied earlier that day. So you have to put in a lot of time, and you have to make sure you are repeating those words, repeating those concepts, repeat those drawings, repetition is king. And then last but not least is being able to adjust your study style. So if you're implementing these study tips that I'm giving you guys and you're not getting the results that you want, then you have to take a step back and reevaluate the situation and say, okay, this is not working for me. Where do I need to adjust? What do I need to change? You know, am I spending enough time? Am I actually repeating the information enough? Am I actually writing effective summaries? Did I go to lecture? Did I listen to lecture? Did I waste time in lecture? Did I pre-read? You know, am I studying at the wrong time? Am I in the wrong location? Is my environment affecting my studying? It took me at least 6 weeks to figure out what worked for me in medical school. And after that, I was good. But it took some people 6 months. It took an entire year to figure it out. But just know that it is a process. Be patient with yourself and make sure you are always open to changing things up. You don't always get to be comfortable in a situation like this because you're stepping into an area that is not comfortable. This is hard. This is challenging. You've never done it before, and it's going to be rough, okay? So be okay with changing things up so that you can figure out what works best for you. And specifically for people who are taking the MCAT or PCAT or LSAT or whatever entrance exam you are studying for, I would say the most effective things to do is to, number one, give yourself enough time to prepare for the exam. Okay, MCAT specifically, the average is 2 to 6 months. If you haven't watched my personal video about the MCAT and my struggles, please check out those videos. I talk about how long I used to study, what I used to study, all that type of stuff, so I won't go into it on this video. But give yourself enough time. Make sure you're doing as many practice questions and practice tests as possible so that you get familiar with the style and with the trends of the exam. Also, you want to work on building up your stamina. And then also make sure you review your wrong answers. Don't just passively review the answers and say, oh yeah, I would have got it if I would have thought about it. No, really dissect your wrong answers so that you do not get it wrong the next time. That is how you improve your score. I hope this information was helpful. If you guys need more details, please just comment below or send me a message on Instagram. I'll be happy to respond to your questions.